allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Are there any citizen statements and petitions? Okay. All right.
Get my message.
So correspondence to the board, consider request to use town-owned parcels number 3 North Avenue, number 6 Milford Street, number 20 Milford Street for parking for the Mendon Lions Club County Fair on Sunday, October 9th, 2022, with a rain date of October 10th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks. On to consider extension of multiple dwelling permit, 91 Millville Road. That's in your packet. This is, says, good afternoon. I'll need a 6-month extension for my temporary permit that expires on September 30th. I expect construction to be completed by the end of this year, but would like to have the buffer due to unexpected delays. The new building is already framed, has rough plumbing and electrical. The current delay is due to National Grid installing a pole for electrical services, which hopefully will be resolved by the end of this month. And it's Lieutenant Greg Burnham.
I move to approve the extension of existing multiple dwelling permit, 91 Millville Road, Craig Brennan, for a period of, can we do 12?
I don't see why not. He requested 6.
Okay, we can stick 6 months.
All right.
Second.
Right. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thanks. Consider amendment, commercial kennel license, Paws Bed and Biscuit, 97 Millville Road.
Expected to be here.
Actually, you called like,
We're just,
Right.
I would,
Okay.
no. There's a request, if you all look at the application, the Paws Bed and Biscuit. Current capacity, the kennel is 75. Proposed increased is to 100. For care, dog daycare and boarding of 40. And I know the,
Kevin.
right, is he?
He just sits right.
He's on behind.
He's right now.
Okay. Well, Daniel, do you want to speak, your attorney want to speak to us?
Sure.
We'll start with that.
well, I think, my client can speak to the nature of this business. Been in town for a significant period of time. Current facility and continually improves and evolves. He's looking for expansion just based upon the real estate he has, the property that's there. I don't know if there's anybody opposing. He's conferred with his neighbors. There didn't seem to be any complaints of noise problem or life that was ever occurred on the property. He's looking to expand the business to increase it by 25 dogs.
And it's the animal control officer.
Yes.
I guess I know I received some information about something that was referred from the Board of Health to us and you investigated. And I guess what I'm concerned with is it looks like whatever the issue was is resolved. Talk to that on a high level to us or?
No, so essentially it wasn't resolved. What happened was we received the complaint. I mean, would you mind if I go through and read my report?
Yes. No, I don't think you need to read the whole report, but tell us what still needs to be resolved.
So essentially, Mr. Antonellis has 25 kennel runs. His 25 kennel runs, on the initial visit, he had 97 dogs on premises. He was 17 dogs over limit. We put him on notice. He was 17 dogs over limit. Along with that, we are also in the middle of a heat advisory. Heat advisory limits dogs time outside to 15 minutes.
And I think what we read was he shut it down the next day. And
Yep. So he reported he shut it down the next day. The following day after that, well, throughout the next day, he made requirements or made adjustments to his tent up above. He received a permit from the town for his tent. He made adjustments to the tent where he could house 29 dogs. Upon arrival at the kennel for the 29 dogs, we checked the tent. Everything was adequate. We were able to set limits to the tent based on the size of the tent. So the limits for the tent, the entire tent is 30 feet by 60 feet. He did one section 30 by 20 and one section 30 by 40. Using the International Boarding and Pet Service Association, best standard services. He was able to do 17 dogs into the large play yard, 12 dogs could fit into the small play yard for a total of 29 dogs. The only issue found that day is after we checked out the tent and everything was adequate up there, I requested a tour of the inside kennels. At first he denied, then he allowed it. We had anywhere ranging from 1 to 5 dogs in each kennel. One dog were typically the over extra large breeds. A few kennels that had 3 and 4 dogs, and then a bunch that had 5 dogs. On a rough count when walking through, I counted 68 dogs. So 68 dogs along with the 29 up above. He was at the same number he was at 2 days prior, which was still 17 over the limit. And I told him that we were going to work with him on his limits to get him slowly down, because I mean, when you have dogs in there, you have to, he had to slowly get them down. So we were working with him. So, and that was the whole goal.
So I guess then the question is, his request is to increase from 75 to 100.
So
And what would he need to do? You're saying it's not resolved. What does he need to do?
no. So in fact, what I'm intending to do is I'm actually intending to do a different order where I'm going to decrease his number temporarily. And the reason we're going to decrease his number temporarily is because as of right now, he only has 25 kennel runs. He has no indoor area in order to keep dogs other than the upper kennel area. And the problem we're running into is that we live in New England, so weather's always changing. We're coming into the colder weather. His outside play yards, he uses carport-like structures as cover. And the problem is that it doesn't meet under the confinement laws. It doesn't meet a requirement for confinement.
Well, are those confinement laws or are those best practices?
Oh, no, it's no. So under Mass General Law, Chapter 140, 174E, it's a confinement law.
Can I think
Yeah, I-
was understanding of my point, that
I just was hoping, because there is some reference to best practices versus Mass General Law.
Yep, no, so I'm
Can
using,
you walk us through sort of what
So-
the law is?
yeah, so essentially,
because I just want to distinguish between the laws that pertains to private parties and the laws that pertains to commercial
Kenneling.
kennels.
Yep.
Because that statutory authority is much different for both. And Mr. Sullivan has already cited an international statute or standard for common practices.
Right, but what we're talking about right now
Mass
is
General Law.
Mass General Law.
Right.
So that's
fine.
I'm on the same.
So-
And that's 140?
and that's exactly what I was going for as well. So essentially, so under Mass General Law, it specifically says confinement. So the big part that John's Attorney Wozniak is referring to is it says that dimensions have to require 100 square feet, provided that commercial kennels with pens for temporary boarding are exempt from that requirement. That's the only part they're exempt from. It physically says for the size requirement they're exempt from. But when you go to the section for dogs, it says right here, a person owning or keeping a dog confined outside in accordance with subsection B shall provide the dog with access to clean water and appropriate dog shelter. A dog shelter shall get the dog remain dry, protected from the elements, enclosed on 3 sides with a roof and a solid floor. A carport doesn't meet those requirements. Although, yes, and I don't want to negatively affect Dan, because I think Dan is a great guy. I think the business he's run has been a great business. The problem is, at the end of the day, I can't worry about who Dan is and what as a person or what he's trying to run as a business. We have to worry about the dogs. That's my number one goal.
What piece wasn't met?
What?
In what you just said, which piece isn't met?
So actually, so essentially dogs remain dry and protected from the elements. If we have rain, snow, hail, sleet,
3 sides.
a structure with 3 sides, a solid floor, none of those are met.
What's considered?
So, well, right now he has the dog on the ground. I mean, it's a carport, so it's on the ground.
Are you really suggesting that my client put a slab of concrete of that magnitude on that hill?
Well,
I'm not suggesting anything. What I'm asking is what the law states it has to be.
But
And I don't know if a solid floor means wood or some other structure, or if it, or dirt is adequate. I don't know.
So,
they're ready to approve the vinyl building without a slab. They're ready to approve that, and that,
Who's ready to approve?
the building commissioner. I've
So
already-
hang on, so I think there's a little bit, I talked to Dan before we started, so I think that there's two things happening here right now, right? So we have a request to extend the license based upon changes he's going to make, right? And obviously, though, that increase would be based upon those changes, which you guys haven't even seen yet, because he has it over there. Now, it's an increase in size of the kennel portion and an increase in size of the tent structure.
The doggy daycare.
Up in the.
Yeah, the tent.
Yep. That's that big area. So if, with that being, sorry, so again, it's kind of tough to.
Yeah, there's a
conversations all over the place right
Right.
now.
I agree.
There's a difference between the doggy daycare and the boarding. Now, that's where the big numbers come from, is because of doggy daycare. We're boarding between 30 and 40 dogs a day. Now, nobody seemed to understand this heat advisory law. There were new posts put on social media and everything. So when he
Can I
came,
let me just, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No
but
problem.
My real issue here
Yeah.
isn't with, a temporary weather situation. My
Okay.
question is that the animal control officer is saying that, there are requirements in the law that your establishment has to meet.
in
in order to-
inclement weather warning.
I'm asking. I'm asking,
During an
I'm
inclement
asking,
warning.
Yep, they did.
I guess I need you to reiterate to me exactly what the law is and what it applies to.
well, so during inclement weather, the requirement says the dog can't be outside more than 15 minutes, but not during inclement weather. It says that the dog has to remain dry and clean, protected from the elements, fully enclosed on at least 3 sides, roofed, and have a solid floor. The entrance of the shelter shall have a flexible and allow the dog's entry and exit, sturdy enough to block entry of elements, weather elements. That's what the law states.
Okay, so you're telling me that it has to have a roof and 3 sides
Solid floor.
and a solid floor. Now, is that for the ones that are being boarded for 24 hours? or the
No,
ones
so
that are
his
at the day?
boarding kennel, he meets the requirements. His boarding kennels, he has 25 indoor 5x5 runs, and he has 25 off of those 5x5 runs. He has 25 exterior 5x10 runs. The issue with that is that, so overall, so 5x5 is 25, 5x10 is 50, for a total of 75 square feet, which is understandable. The difference is really and truthfully, he should average 1 dog per run. And what we're running into is that essentially when I arrived and he had 1 to 5 dogs per run. And then the problem is he's then combining dogs, more than 1 dog per run from multiple families.
Because that was an inclement weather emergency and a
Okay,
new
okay.
situation that we weren't aware of.
Sure.
So-
Hang on, just let
We
me.
were scrambling.
As you're explaining this,
Mhm.
make sure you articulate what is required under Mass General Law versus IBSPCA, whatever
Yep,
that is.
so-
right?
so-
And just, 'cause I
Okay,
mean,
so.
because the mixing in your report, you talked about
So,
mixing.
so under
household.
mixing, so essentially what I did was I reached out to Michael Cahill, who is the director for the Department of Agriculture. And he stated that mixing dogs is not allowed. And the reason per kennel
According to
run.
who?
According, yeah, is that?
So essentially under chapter 140, section 137C, which is about licenses, kennel licenses, it says that if a judgment in the of such person or body, like where is it? Hold on. So, is not being maintained in a sanitary or humane manner. Per Michael Cahill, mixing of dogs from more than 1 household into 1 kennel is not considered a humane manner.
Who's Michael Cahill?
He's the director of the Department of Agriculture.
Got it. Thank you.
And I'd suggest to you that it doesn't mean his word has has any consequence.
No.
This is one just for on amended.
I have a question.
That's his opinion.
So-
And if I may go on, my client mixes dogs into runs because of social interaction between the animals, and some dogs require it. And he at times even brings his own personal dogs into it. So there may be this,
They
you know,
sleep better.
what certain groups seem to think is proper in the care of animals versus what is in their best interest in safe and clean and dry.
So again, regardless of, hang on, sorry, one second, sorry. Doesn't matter to me about anybody's opinion, right? Does the law state you can't mix dogs? We can't go and hinge on a word that says a humane manner, and then somebody decides that, well, in my opinion, a humane manner is mixing dogs.
So essentially, so that's why I went to the state. I went to Animal Rescue League, I went to MSPCA, and I went to a woman by the name of Jenny Mather, who is an animal control consultant. I literally sought advice from all three, and all three stated that mixing multiple dogs into one 5x5 kennel run or in any kennel run is considered inhumane.
But the
You
question
are-
is, what does the mass law say about?
So again, mass law says that inhumane manner. So the thing is, just like
Just wanna
any
clarify
law,
what you just said. I'm sorry.
yes.
Basically, what you're saying, because you sort of, we're off of mixing households. To me, that is an opinion, a perspective of what
Yeah,
humane
I
is. So I
don't-
mean, part of me is anything that's perspective right now,
Mhm.
I sort of want to park. I want to understand what is codified.
Yep.
If the town amendment chooses to codify that and say, we believe inhumane is mixing households, we would then do that as a board, but we haven't done that. So in my mind, that's parked, right?
Mhm.
What you just said was purely based on number of animals within a 5x5.
Well, no, not just number. So the
Okay.
number of animals within a
My
5x5.
question to you is, based on his kennel runs,
Yep.
what is the maximum number he should be allowed to board?
So again, when I reached out to the International Pet Boarding Association, okay, what they stated. Hold on one second, I'm pulling it up. What they stated was that minimum of 70 to 100 square feet per dog, 50 square feet for a small dog, and 40 square feet of space for essentially a toy dog. So if you have a 75 square foot kennel and you have 2 toy dogs, that's 80 square feet.
Yeah.
So again, this is the thing. So 80 square feet for 2 toy dogs. Technically, you can fit 1 regular sized dog, 2 toy dogs, or 1 small dog.
What is
But
the law?
Well,
But again, the whole thing is.
Hang on,
so-
just wait. What
Yes.
my question though is, it sounds like the idea is subjective, that what the law says, it can't be inhumane.
Yes,
And that's what the law says.
that's what the law says. It
So
can't
the
be
question
inhumane.
is, what is humane versus what's inhumane? And who is it that to decide? And I think Mike is right, that it's this board to decide what we're going to give that license for. So I'm going to ask Daniel in or his counsel to speak about, right, you're asking to increase from 75 to 100, right?
For daycare.
For daycare.
Can I
That's
ask a-
not-
ask a question? Waiting. So often when you board your dog at a kennel, you're given a form when the dog goes in, and there's a box on the form that the owner of the dog basically releases or opts into allowing to have their dog in a shared space in a multiple kennel.
Yes.
Do you have that as part of your practice now?
It is in the paperwork, but I never put a.
Yes,
separate
he
box.
does. He has it in the paperwork. It's not a separate box that they check, but they sign an acknowledgement agreement that.
so it's-
Right, so the short answer to that is no.
Well, it's in
Well, it's not
there,
a separate
but it's not predominant,
separate-
which
so
might
Is it,
be.
is it a negative consent?
It's a negative consent.
Yeah, that- it's gotta- yeah.
They will consent to the care of the animals. And I know, other than this anonymous complaint that drove Mr. Sullivan, who we have our own opinion as to who that may be. If you look at the town of Mendon and my client's record with regard to the care of these animals over a period of years, not months, not days, but years, and significant years in this town, he doesn't have any significant complaints. He doesn't have anything that's really dealt with that I'm aware of.
Like I'll put a couple, there'll be pups from the same household, 2 or 3. And if you're having 50-pound dogs, they all cuddle up together fine in that space. If I have a dog that's freaking out because, I mean, even Blackstone now has, I think, a dog therapy dog. And I think, aren't those dogs put with the other dogs that are starting to have panic attacks? I don't agree with that, but we're dealing with dogs that don't do well.
That is a requirement, I'd be more than happy to increase by putting that box in
That's
predominant.
what I was gonna say.
That's easy
I
enough.
have no issue.
Hang on, Mike.
Modifying the form based upon the inclement weather issues that my client just experienced, because what he had to do, you can imagine being a dog owner, he had to let people take the dogs out.
Counselor, if I can just, I don't think we have an issue with the inclement weather thing. That was a unique situation
thing, yeah.
that the animal control officer came and he worked to resolve it. My issue is with the actual numbers on a normal day. So Mike, you have a question?
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern is that your permit said 75 and you willfully took in 92. And hang on, I have a problem, and I have a problem with the response if that was accurate. I mean,
I can't say what the number was exactly, and it was during the summer when I have everybody drop off in the morning, and if everybody picked up in the morning too, that number wouldn't have been like that, but some of them are picking up in the afternoon, so it just wasn't balanced well. Because we'll have like this many dogs getting dropped off, this many picked up, so just for that time frame.
it sounds like a mea culpa, like, oops. You're saying, oops. We were 17 over, which
Yeah,
is a significant percentage over what I mean,
During the summer, yeah.
Well, I just see, and now you're asking to expand, so pardon.
For the
And
daycare.
then the point would be is that I mean, I would say if we're gonna, two things would be, to me, conditions, and this is more of just an open discussion, is to say, one, I would look for our animal control officer to tell us that you are set up to suitably handle 100 pets and I didn't know you were gonna come in and say you wanted to reduce the number.
Yes.
But I would say, are you set up to handle 100? If you have plans to do it, perhaps we should revisit this when you were set up to handle it.
We already have
Second-
spacing.
Second point would be, I would want the animal control officer to be able to do site inspections,
Sure.
which I think I read where it might have been denied or delayed or something.
It was delayed. It was initially denied, and then I explained to him the importance of it, because
Right.
otherwed I'd have to issue a cease and desist,
Yeah,
and then he
but you
allowed
wanna
an
make sure-
inspection.
Those are the
Um,
two things, not so much.
Plenty of time to talk to me.
I just wanted to make sure I was doing everything right, because in this world, you step the wrong
And-
way.
and
You have you have a
So
question?
you want to read, so let's start with the two things that are really kind of important for us here tonight, right? That's the reduction. What are you looking to read? Now, please, I need the designation between daycare and boarding.
So the problem is
How those numbers coincide.
in my opinion, there shouldn't be a difference, because again, we live in New England. So the problem is,
What does the
is-
law say, though?
well, again,
Does it?
so
Does the law reference it?
so the problem is he doesn't have suitable house or an area off the play yard for the dogs to go into. Okay, so essentially
Boarding or daycare?
for boarding.
For boarding.
So for daycare purposes, he can suitably bring all the dogs in. Okay, for daycare purposes, he cannot. And like, for instance, I pulled the weather stats for the last year and a half. So the average temperature in January is 29 degrees. The average temperature is February is 29 degrees. Average temperature in March is 39 degrees. Average temperature in April is 47 degrees.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is 3 months a year, 3.5 months a year, we have below freezing temperature, where it states that below freezing, no dog should be outside more than 15
You know,
minutes.
I want to kind of take a step back, because you're saying that there's one standard for boarding and another one for daycare. Is
Well,
that right?
no, yes and no.
Okay,
So
well, but
that's why I
we
would like to
don't have-
explain.
But what we have is, it says current capacity of kennel, 75. It doesn't seem to delineate between.
But that's the thing
boarding.
is, I'm not in agreement with the current numbers. I was an
Well, yeah,
animal
but
control officer when his
it
numbers
even
were
goes- right,
increased.
It even goes beyond that, because my question is there an issue with the way that we issue this
Right.
permit?
Yes.
You know, should we be issuing a permit with an
boarding,
overall
that's-
capacity, or do we need to rework this?
I think it needs to be reworked.
Okay.
Can I interject? Because Mr. Sullivan seems to, he's got the animal, he's got all these independent entities. and he cites us-
MSPCA or an ARL and not independent.
What I'm saying is, he's got all these other entities, and he actually cited to my client perspective, all these. which isn't even.
Well,
affecting
we're
the
not,
point.
you know what?
I understand that, Mr. Chair, but with all due respect, you just gave Mr. Sullivan the right and the ability to interject something with respect to my client's application. Also, he's filing what I guess is a notice that he intends to move this board to seek a reduction of my client's license without any notice whatsoever. I'd like to know what the basis of that is, and it's because it can't be statute.
I just asked the question, that's what I'm trying to understand. I need to understand both sides, because I was able to talk to Dan before the meeting started. And then if you have copies of those, of your expansion, please start passing them out. So what do you want to reduce the number to?
So essentially, based on the 25 kennel runs, I would like to reduce the number to 50 dogs. The reason
Down to 50.
The reason I am saying 50 dogs is because if he had 50 toy dogs, he could put 2 dogs per kennel, 25 kennel runs, he can safely board 50 dogs.
What we've been doing is we have party tents and we enclose the party tents if the weather is bad. And we've been doing it for 13 years.
Plus he has heaters, plus he has air conditioners, plus he has fans, plus he has misters.
And we're known for, we have a misting system that runs through.
Part of the issue, Mr. Antonellis contacted me was like hearing the animal control officer is detrimental to his business. And as a consequence, he wanted to consult legal counsel before he let Mr. Sullivan onto his property. That's why there was a delay, not because he was thwarting the authority, but when the authority comes on and starts creating rules based upon third parties, interpretation of statutory authority, and not in the bylaws of town amendment. That's a problem.
I would like to
I would
include that.
suggest the inspection had nothing to do.
My inspection had nothing to do with the law.
But he wasn't allowed to inspect, so I'm sort of, but anyway,
So the increase, and Dan, I'm sure you can speak for yourself on this. The increase is to 100 based upon the expansion, which is obviously crudely drawn right now, but drawn by, I'm told by Allen Engineering, which will get the proper drawings in, to increase to 100 based upon the expansion. Did you get a copy?
I did not. No, it's okay. And again, I think that we should revisit this upon the expansion. And that's what I'm saying. Like, again, I am all in support of Dan growing larger and having a larger kennel license. I'm not. I have no problem with Dan. I have no problem in most of Dan's business practices. What I have a problem with is in the violation of Mass General Law, the violation of his kennel license, and going forward, us using best practices to make sure dogs are safe. That's what our job is. That's what my job is.
And I don't disagree with that. But again, what I'm coming back to here is I think there may be an inherent problem with the way that we license it, saying that your capacity is 75. It doesn't break down,
Yeah, but
boarding
again,
versus.
I think that my opinion, and maybe I'm just being too simple about it, is if you have 75 dogs, right? And you decide you want to have 50 daycare dogs that day, because you only have 25 boarders that week or what it may,
Right.
you're allowed to adjust that flow
Right.
based upon your capacities that you currently know of.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
That I don't know that.
Well, the time of year.
But I just want to be really clear, because no one's changing, he can't change the mix. You're putting a ceiling on how many he can kennel. And if there's a reduction in kenneling, you could increase the number of dogs in daycare.
Yeah, and essentially the reason I'm saying this is simply because at the end of the day, when we have inclement weather, if Dan has to move dogs from outside to inside, there is now a suitable place to do so, which up until now, there hasn't been.
So a question, Dan, and these, do you believe you're gonna, with this expansion, you're gonna have a suitable place to bring 100 dogs?
I already have, that arena is 30 by 60. When I'm done, it's gonna be double that size.
Okay, all right, so
And
the
you
answer
see
is
the
yes,
picture.
you think.
I can easily do
Right.
60 dogs for daycare in that arena.
And are you
So-
aware what these plans are?
So no, again, he sent me a brief little synopsis of what his plans were.
No, it's
And
fine.
again, once his plans come to fruition, I'm willing to reevaluate this all day long. Again, no issue with Dan, no issue with, what he's doing.
But this is what I need, because I also agree that, so now you're trying to expand a business, right? And when you try to expand in a business, you have to maximize your profit, right?
Mhm.
Based upon the amount of square footage you have, especially in this type of business. okay?
Yep.
So what he's asking, I'm assuming that this conversation needs to probably take place between maybe you guys a little bit more here to say that, hey, this is the size of this is what I'm going to expand over here. And would you approve 100 dogs within these spaces based upon what I want to do? Because now, does he have to go an extra 10 feet? You don't want to go and put an addition on your building to find out you're only going to have 90 dogs, and that now you're everything you've looked at as far as what your financials are now don't work.
So what I want to say is if Dan goes, as of right now, Dan's tent holds 29 dogs. If he does an identical tent, that's another 29 dogs for a total of 58 dogs. He has 25 kennel runs. So 25 kennel runs plus 58 dogs, I'd be open to say that he is comfortably fitting 83 dogs. And that's just quick math off the top of my head. So
Did you have something you wanted to interject, a question you had, you wanted to ask?
I'm not so sure exactly if it's a question so much, but I think there's a confusion, and it may be in the way the permits are drafted, but it seems to me that there's one set of requirements for your boarding and another set of requirements for your doggy daycare. I think you should be able to have a number that you can move around as needed, but I think if you're going to be able to do that, you can't put, it seems to me like the problem is when you have more dogs going into the kennel area it just seems to me that if you're going to have dogs move around, you've got to make sure that where they're moved, you have enough space for when you flex more people in.
And the plan is not to have, well, we're going to have a daycare building and then a boarding. And like right now, we currently do everything in these yards. And according to Kevin, I can comfortably, space-wise, put 84 dogs just in the 2 play yards that we have between the little dog and the big dog. And we have the kennel too, which is separate size. My plan is to double that size of the arena, use the arena for 60 daycare dogs. That still leaves me the whole kennel and those other 2 play yards for the 40 dogs that are going to be.
So
even with the.
So let me just say that my feeling when I first looked at this, and this was first on the agenda a couple of weeks ago when I tabled it, is that this discussion needs to be held between you two to figure this out before it comes in front of the board, because there's no way that I feel comfortable calling for a motion to expand this or retract it or anything else. I think there's too many unanswered questions that need to be resolved.
So I do want to mention that under the kennel licenses, okay, essentially it says that animal control officer may at any time inspect the kennel or cause the inspection of a kennel if, in the judgment of such person or body, the kennel is not being maintained in a sanitary or humane manner, or if records are not being kept properly, such person or body shall by order revoke or suspend the kennel license. Essentially, what my intention was, and again, on a temporary basis until we can get this resolved, was to do an order to reduce the limit to the kennel license. And the purpose of this, again, is to be able to come up with the best practices and what's safe for the dogs. Again, I'm not trying to negatively affect Dan and Dan's business. I'm trying to protect the dogs, which is what my job is.
Business has been on 13 years. I can tell you right now, if that happens,
Look,
you know.
so I agree,
You're gonna just based upon.
Hold on.
Nobody's going to destroy anything.
I've had a business, we've had a business in this town for 13 years. This license was granted, I believe, at this amount right from the get-go. I don't believe you came and asked for an extension. Maybe you did. I'm remembering it wrong. But I remember when you.
It was
I was
increased.
here before we extended
Okay,
it to 70.
so it was increased. There has been no finding of any of this inhumane neglect that's now being used as a word, which is a very big word, up until this day, right? So, okay, so.
I also want to mention that over the last 5 years of our 4 years of kennel inspections with Dan, they're always scheduled on a weekend, on a Saturday.
Yep.
Dan would schedule them in advance, we go in. We would not do additional inspections because we wouldn't receive complaints. So
Yep.
essentially we did a yearly inspection on a Saturday when he didn't have daycare dogs and he only had his boarding dogs.
Okay.
So what I'm going to ask
Mhm.
is that we just table this
Mhm.
and you get together with him and his attorney if he wishes.
Yep.
And figure this out. And then when assuming you can come to an an understanding, then we'll put it back on the agenda and consider increasing it.
And
Well, I think the increase comes with the expansion.
I
Correct,
know that I'm
right.
gonna be able
When
to
it's-
for.
I hate to see a reduction, but
Yeah,
if they.
it's not gonna be a reduction.
If you guys agree that a reduction of 10 dogs is the right
What's that?
thing to do, I just,
Well, if I let, right.
again, I'm having a hard time with the third
Well,
one.
Mark, just to be clear, you also want a more extensive plans.
Yeah, well, can I ask for
That plan has nothing to
clarification
do
in
with
terms
us.
of work, yeah, but working it out in terms of what I'd like to the chairman's point is that the two parties get together. If you understand he wants to expand it, I want you to make sure you can give him some insight as to what would be, amenable to you as the animal control officer, what that means.
Yep.
So that you're coming back here in agreement, right? That it's reasonable, right?
Correct.
Right, the expansion of the plans, the detailed plans are gonna be needed at the building department.
Right.
That's what that was my.
Yeah, not necessarily for us. I understand the concept. I understand. Again,
Oh yeah, I just want 2 words. I want you to say, I'm good with it. I want 100. Can we vote on it?
Yes, I would like to work with Dan on this, and I want us, again, I want to see him grow.
Yes.
In the meantime, is everyone on board that?
Cindy has something.
Oh, sorry.
The only thing I was gonna say, there was mention of Dan's attorney being involved. I think it would be helpful if I could also be involved. just
Yes.
Because I've got some familiarity with it, and I think it's only fair that we might be able to resolve issues that may not otherwise get resolved. That's all.
Yep.
So I agree that you guys have
I'm
to come
okay.
together in a unified front. And you've got to have the ability to not be hamstrung when there are violations, and you need the flexibility to move dogs around. But I have no doubt that there's enough of a legal framework to accomplish that. And it sounds like you have enough space to accomplish that. I
I'm
just
also,
wanna be
I'm
involved.
a certified veterinary nurse. I've been doing this for 28 years. I made an oath. So I'm not going to do any, it's my oath not to do any harm. Just like you would expect a veterinarian, I'm an RN, but in the veterinary field. And I've been doing this for, as I said, 28 years. So I'm not going to do anything to endanger them.
Lori Sweet, you had a comment you wanted to?
Very sweet, 50 Milford Street. 13 years I used his service, so I'm very familiar with it. And I can tell you, he's not the type of guy, and I don't know him personally, but he's not the type of guy that's gonna say, I need another dog just to get the income in. And he didn't care that he was over his limits, because he's turned me away multiple times, saying, I don't have enough space, you can't board your dog this weekend. I've done doggy daycare, and I've done boarding.
I think that anybody who lives in Mendon and has a dog and has tried to order it has been turned away from time
My
to time.
suggestion would be, and I don't think it's on the reservation, you have to make a reservation online. If you could add maybe the box that says you're okay with your dog kenneling with somebody from a different
Well-
family, that might help you with some of these humane and inhumane.
Well,
things.
again, what I'm asking is that the animal control officer and the business owner get together, and town council can certainly be involved in.
That box is already in the process of being prepared. And what we're going to do is we're going to expand it in the font, so it's bolder.
So again, I'd ask you to meet offline and discuss this and come to an understanding. Does anybody else have any things?
One other comment. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure that we're clear. So Kevin does a really great job on behalf of the town of Mendon, and he's here doing that job. And it sounds like your business is excellent, and there really isn't a significant concern around anything that has to do with humane treatment for dogs. So
Correct.
I want to make sure that anybody who was
Yeah.
paying attention to this meeting or thought that there was an issue, that doesn't seem to be the issue. The issue seems to be that Kevin needs some more parameters so that he can do the correct enforcement he feels comfortable with, and that you are also on the same page with that so that everybody can operate together. And so just want to be clear so that it doesn't go out into as if you were
Thank you.
called in here for some sort of
Yeah.
outrageous, because
Because you weren't.
because quite honestly, I read the report too, and I was expecting something, and all Kevin was saying was exemplary things basically about the conditions, even on surprise inspection, right? And so that is a testament, I think, right there to the business. So.
And yeah, again, I want to mention that, Dan, I think the world of you. I think the world of your business. I've never had, up until this anonymous complaint, I've never had a complaint about Dan's kennel, other than the fact he didn't allow tours. And again, I've told Dan that, like, but again, he's busy, he has dogs back there. I wouldn't
Right.
necessarily allow tours either, but again, other than that complaint, I've never had another complaint about him or his kennel. I think Dan's a great guy. I think he's done a great job. I think that going forward, though, we need more requirements and regulations so that we don't have more problems and we don't run into issues at a later date. And I think we need to look at the best interest of the dogs.
Sorry, to that point, when you guys get together, can you make sure you're kind of looking at the pending legislation in front of the?
Yep, that's what I was
Legislature.
doing, actually. I was looking at
Right,
the
just,
pending
I mean,
legislation.
so whatever your plan is, make sure you're thinking of the future, so we're not back here saying,
And I've already started looking at
Yeah.
the Ollie's law, but I don't know whether or not the present legislation is gonna be retroactively applied or prospectively applied. I suspect that portions of it can be prospectively applied, but there are portions that apply to individuals versus commercial kennels as well.
it feels like this, it's adding more clarity to the language too, so.
It is, but you know, what they say, all well intentioned, but.
And I want to mention that I actually, again, in looking at all of this, we're trying to look at best practices.
I'm working
And
with a
I-
consultant that is, just went to that.
Yep, and so I went to Dan and I said, hey, if you can find me another source for best practices other than what I found, I'm willing to take under advisement. Again, I'm not looking to negatively affect Dan or his business. I'm looking to make sure that both the town of Mendon's protected, animal control's protected, the dogs are protected. I want to make sure everyone's protected here and we're doing our due diligence.
And as I said, I am working with a known kennel consultant who just went to that conference for that organization you're
Yep,
talking about.
International Pet
So he's
Boarding.
working with me to make sure we're doing
Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Where's?
Oh, his lawyer's a great guy.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, folks.
All right, item 6, discuss ZBA Concom bylaw, which was added at the May 2022 annual town meeting. Laura, can you bring the actual bylaw up? If you go into the mendonmass.gov.
It's in the.
Yes.
Just a question. Has anybody reached out to planning board to see whether there's any questions with planning board on it?
On what? On what?
On the number of dogs?
Well, again, the issue is that, and I don't know if it has to do, I think it's more Board of Health
No, I just,
than planning, but again, what's gone on is the animal control officer has a good handle on his job and Daniel's a professional. So I just would rather have them take it offline and resolve the issues. And, if we have to fine tune, the process in which we give these kennel licenses, but it seems like it hasn't been a problem for decades. So
Can have it. This.
Like, this is what you're looking for, correct?
yeah.
Yeah, okay. Get that real quick.
Okay, so this is the bylaw that was voted at town meeting, and it says no elected member of the select board or planning board shall be appointed to or otherwise serve on the conservation committee or zoning board of appeals, either as a member or alternate member. And it passed at the May annual town meeting, and then it was sent by the town clerk to the Attorney General's office. And about a month ago, they came back and approved the language as written. And there seems to be an issue of the members who are currently, there are currently a couple of members of the planning board, elected members of the planning board. One serves on the zoning board of appeals and one serves on the conservation commission. And the question is, can they, or are they going to serve the rest of their appointed terms on the ZBA and Concom? Or do they need to resign and or be removed? Because they can't be on both boards at the same time. So that's the issue that was brought up, and that's what I want to discuss and get a resolution to. So I guess I'm going to start with council, if you can give us, your opinion on that.
I will give you my opinion and I'm going to preface it with no one's going to be happy with me, but that's just not the way it is. Whenever a bylaw is adopted, unless there's specific reasons, and usually it's like for criminal rights and things like that, it's applied prospectively. Okay?
What does that mean?
It means it goes into effect and it takes place for actions happening in the future. So anyone serving now, if they're elected to either of these positions, in the future, they could never, that's 100% clear, they could not be appointed. There is a split of opinion among individuals, not just in this room, but in, attorneys. Applying the law as we know we apply laws, it would go forward because you can't undo what you've already done, right? It's kind of like zoning and grandfathering. On the other hand, it's clear, but let's keep in mind, this was also a citizen petition. So it was crafted by citizens and the town could not make any changes to that. It is also clear that people wanted it to apply immediately. I don't know. I think it would be pretty much 50-50 if it was put before a court, what the court would do. I think reasonable minds could take different positions on this. I think the Attorney General, when they approved it, probably was anticipating it not being retroactive, that would apply, it goes into effect now, you cannot be appointed going forward or anything else, but that's not written in stone. So I really do think, unfortunately, you've got a bylaw that isn't black and white here. I mean, one thing is I can write to the AG and ask what they were intending to approve. You can have a discussion among yourselves about what you all think should happen. All I'm saying is, this is one of those decisions that if the town or the board were to say, do X, I could make an argument either way. And I really don't think that, it's, all I can say is it's unusual to have a law take retroactive effect.
Right. Is there anybody who was involved in the petition or signed the petition that's either on the call, on the meeting, or in the room? Jane Lowell?
I signed the petition, I did not form it. I think the language shall be appointed, I understand, or otherwise serve seems to be meaning they can't serve now, once the bylaws approved by the AG.
I
That
do.
would be my interpretation.
I will tell you that the petitioner asked me about it. And I did have a conversation with town council at the time about this language. And at the time, Cindy, I don't know if you remember.
Petition?
What's that?
For a citizen's petition?
Yes. And what I was told was, you thought, again, the same discussion, well, it's a citizen petition, so we can't change it. But you thought that the Attorney General might reject it because of that phrase, or otherwise serve. But-
Or that they would interpret it as going forward, and otherwise serve, upon further information in retrospection and talking to other people, could be as a volunteer, as someone just doing something in addition to being appointed. There are other things for it. I am not going to sit here and tell you in black and white, it's one way or the other. I can't.
I don't think you can.
I can't.
But my
because of the
question
way
is
it's-
that, so when and again, and I don't know the answer to this, but when the board appoints somebody to a 3-year appointment, can they remove that person before that 3-year appointment is up? Or do we have to let them?
There is a provision that you can remove who you appoint. I mean, you can always remove who you appoint. That's different issue than the board or the appointing authority. This is not the appointing authority taking action, right? If you appoint someone, they serve at your
Well,
whim.
that's, well, right, but I mean, what I'm asking is, if the intention is clear that they don't want this to continue and they want it to immediately stop, there's somebody on this board, we as a board could remove those folks so that it's in compliance with the law, with the bylaw, right?
You can
how
remove
is it-
somebody under your existing structure.
Right.
If you appoint someone, you can remove them.
Okay.
I don't think that the intent behind the bylaw, if it was challenged, would be considered. Because short of a Massachusetts general law statute that has a formal legislative history and hearings and input and public comment, there is no real, that's part of the huge problem with local laws. There is no quote unquote legislative history. So if there was a dispute and and the AG to say, the AG wouldn't say, well, what's the legislative history on this? Because there is none for local laws. So yes, a board can unappoint somebody. A board can refuse to appoint somebody again. Under this bylaw, you would be prohibited
Right.
from appointing someone in either of these conditions.
Just a
It's
couple.
this one short
question.
term that is open.
So the question right now, this is the execution of this bylaw is somewhat ambiguous in terms of how it would be applied. So given that, it's probably incumbent upon this board to decide how we would apply it. And if somebody, how would it be challenged, right? I'd be curious, because you mentioned if it goes to court, blah, blah, blah.
Well, I mean, I would think depending on one way you went, someone could challenge your interpretation of the bylaw and say you are applying. The state could independently say, wait a minute.
Right,
something
Is
took
this board's authority to remove somebody or unappoint them simply because of the intent of this bylaw, as it appears to read? Is that actionable, or does it end here?
Could I add to that is, regardless of this bylaw, can we remove people that are appointed these commissions arbitrarily, or do we need cause, or, how would we unappoint somebody?
You can't unappoint someone for improper cause. But when you appoint somebody, you don't have to have them, stealing all the money out of the town treasury for you to say you're not going to stay on. I mean, there are many situations, and I'm not talking about Mendon, where I'm thinking of another city where someone's put someone in as a department head and they're not following their policies, or they're not happy with what they're doing. Take them out.
This seems
That's
to be
part
a-
of the appointing.
this
You
seems
get
to-
to unappoint.
This seems to be a theme tonight. Nobody is suggesting that anybody is doing anything wrong or untoward or illegal.
Are you kidding
or
me? This
anything.
bylaw was put in specifically for that.
I guess the reason I was asking what unappointing was, regardless of the bylaw, is there could we remove anybody who's in conflict, regardless of the bylaw, and follow the spirit of the bylaw? Or do we need to really do this based on this bylaw and see if there's unintended consequences?
I have some information about this.
Go ahead, Carl.
Yes, I have up in front of me Mass Chapter 40, Section 8C, Conservation Commission, and the relevant sentence is, quote, "Any member of a commission so appointed may, after a public hearing, if requested, be removed for cause by the appointing authority."
Sure.
Thank you.
That's true, because that's standard, that is the best way.
We're not talking about for
But
cause.
we're
That's-
also not talking about a state statute that specifically has a process put in to say, because conservation members and agents are supposed to be independent and to do their job, you want to have them insulated from public whim unless they're doing something wrong and that they have a hearing to defend themselves. That's common due process, but that's a statutory requirement. So it's not directly applicable to the other situations. That does not mean that it isn't common practice in a lot of areas, or that it's not good practice, but it is inapplicable to the situation.
Okay, so I guess the question I have, does anybody else have any other questions or comments they want to make?
How can I ask a question?
Sure.
Probably shouldn't, but I'm just curious, how long are the remaining terms for anyway?
Well, my understanding is one of them goes until until June of 2023. And that is the one on the Concom, I think, and the ZBA is a year longer. Is that right? I think. But anyways, does anybody want to make a motion? To do what? To allow them to stay on or to remove the ones who are elected.
I guess one other question. If folks were removed, are we impacting quorum or are they still functioning committees?
Mike,
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah,
Mike, it's so good.
sure.
Question for you. I think one of the issues that seems to be coming up on a frequent basis is, and this isn't personal attacks or anything, but that there is a lot of conflict of interest where people are trying to vote in both the planning board and the conservation commission. And a lot of members have had to abstain. And I think that's where, accelerating or making a determination that, now would be a great time to start turning over some seats and bringing in some people who don't have that conflict so that we can make, some forward motion.
So Kathy, you're the one who filed the petition, right?
I am, yes.
The perceived conflict.
All right, so what you're telling me is this was what you and the people who signed it, you talked to, that was your motivation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm watching, these meetings on a rather regular basis and seeing that, more members are having to step back from participating in voting. And, and I know there are accommodations made when all the members of the board, have to abstain for one reason or another. But I think in the long plan, we need people that can actually participate without that conflict, in the voting part, in the decision making.
So Kathy, what has been delayed due to abstentions from voting?
Lonnie, I'm not sure specifically what has been delayed, but we have had to, I know at one of the planning board meetings, all of the members cannot vote with respect to a particular project. And so, because, it could be perceived as conflict of interest. So when a project that large comes in front of, the boards, I think we have to have people who can actually, make decisions, and be able to vote that don't have a perceived conflict.
But this doesn't affect the planning board.
Okay.
No, but it affects planning board members who, go from planning board to Concom and the back and forth. You know what I'm saying?
No, I don't.
All right, Jane, you have a question?
And they all of course, those two boards have to adhere. And so.
So Jane, what diversity are we looking for? By having two members not on the planning board,
Correct.
or on by not being able to be appointed to the Concom or the ZBA and be on the planning board at the same time, what diversity are we getting?
Well, let me.
Hold on, I asked a question.
No, I know you asked a question and you've asked a lot of questions.
I'm going to continue to ask questions.
Yeah, well, you can, but I asked you to stop for a second. Let her finish.
Your question, and I think that, if you're on the planning board, You're involved in certain things. The Concom has a very different perspective on things.
I asked Jane to use the mic because they can't.
Oh, Jane, they can't
I'm
hear you.
sorry. I just think that, as I said, the planning board, it gets, and I don't mean this in a terrible way that anybody's breaking the law, but it gets a little incestuous when you have the same people on several boards and commissions. And I think it's much better to, for other people to be involved. And,
That's what you meant by diversity.
yes, that's what I meant.
You
by
have your
diversity.
hand up?
Was that directed to me?
No, I said you had your, I think you had
Yes.
your hand up.
Yes, I do. But I wanted to wait until the other person's finished speaking.
I'm finished.
Yeah, she's
Okay.
finished. Go ahead.
Okay, introduce myself, Carl Hummel, 15 Misco Road. I'm Chair of the Conservation Commission. Earlier, we heard Town Council say that she would be open to asking for an advisory opinion from the Attorney General about whether this bylaw is proscriptive or retroactive, and I would so recommend. Thank you.
Sorry. I would just say if we do that though, I mean, I think either Jane or Kathy or both of you, I mean, I think what I also heard was the intent was to be like, I don't know what the right word is, not retroactive, I guess, right? Immediate as
Right.
opposed to, so.
And you know, what I'm gonna say is the same thing I said at that meeting was that it's apparent that, you know, the planning board and the select board, because it includes both of those boards in this bylaw, are executive branch, really part of the government, and where town meeting is a legislative branch, the zoning board of appeals and the conservation commission really play a judicial role. And my feeling was that it was a good idea not to have somebody who's on the executive branch also part of the judicial role. It's kind of like the president being a member of the Supreme Court. And it just seemed to make sense to me. And that's my feeling. Bob Sweet, you have a,
It's my understanding that if you have to abstain from one and you're on both, you'd have to abstain from both, which would take one person out of both boards.
no, you know what, and I'm not sure the abstention has anything to do with them being on both boards. Just, I mean, they have to abstain for whatever the reason. But you're right. If they have to abstain in one, they might have to abstain of them both. That may be true. But again, I guess what the question for this board is, do we want to take any action tonight to, within our authority, and remove anybody who was elected? In this case, it doesn't affect anybody on the select board. I mean, and I would say in the past, I know, Lonnie, I think when you were elected to this board, you were on the ZBA and you were encouraged to resign from the ZBA, right?
Well, because the law didn't need to have select board already in there because there's already a bylaw that says you can't do it. You can't.
I don't
be
know.
select board and everything else, so it didn't even need to be in there. But also don't want to get lost on what Jane was just saying about multiple people, about people serving on multiple boards. We need to look across the entire gamut now, if that's the case, and we should really be making a decision from here with people that are on 4 boards, on 5 boards. We have people in the people that have come forward so far, maybe there's going to be more once these seats get vacated. But the 3 people that came forward to Concom already serve on other boards in the community. So again, it gets a little foolish at some point here with this nonsense.
All right, I'm just going to say, well, first of all, I don't think it's nonsense. I'm not going to call it nonsense. And
Well,
second, yeah, I know you are. I heard you, and it's recorded, and when I get that, and you're that I'm not saying it's not a valid opinion, but at the same time, the issue is with what I see as a conflict, and I do with select board or planning board versus zoning board of appeals and Concom, and just the idea that the planning board makes the zoning rules and the zoning board of appeals allows people.
Not at all. No, the town
Well,
government makes the zoning rules.
Well,
The planning board oversees planning. ZBA is a place, hold on, the ZBA is a place to go to when you're seeking relief from zoning rules.
Exactly.
And the conservation has to do with wetland violations or
Can I make a
wetland
suggestion?
expansion.
I don't think I want to we can't relitigate the bylaw itself, whether it's good or bad. This is about how do we apply it to the town,
That's what I'm trying to do.
right? And I just want to kind of, if we can think about the action side of it, and I agree with previous Carl in his recommendation, if we can, if you think it's worthwhile, it's town council, that the Attorney General might give us some direction on how best to apply something like this, a recommendation.
I'm willing to
Or-
reach out.
or-
I don't know if they'll. do
I can
it.
tell you, I did call them and left 2 messages when I was asked about this because I'm looking for an answer. And
And they won't
I've
give
gotten-
advisory opinions, but
Right,
where they've
right.
approved this, they might clarify what they
Yeah,
were.
and that's
approving.
exactly what
Right.
because I think you and I talked about this before and I tried to get that answer for this meeting, but I don't have it.
The only other thing I'd like to say is, well, 2 other things. First of all, every one of the boards has their own separate jurisdiction and they are governed by different state laws as well as different local laws. So they don't report to each other and they have different, but sometimes overlapping because of the nature that it's a project and it trips all sorts of different things. But to Jane's point, what she said to, what I heard her say was she voted for this for the same reason she voted to expand from 3 to 5, which was to encourage more people and to have more diverse boards. But if you remember correctly, when that went into place, it went into place prospectively, like most laws do, that it waited till the end of someone's term and then.
Well,
then
because
was
it, well,
going
because
up.
it was a different matter, because it was expanding the numbers. So it had nothing to do with removing anybody. It had to with increasing it. So it's apples and oranges. But,
Well-
all right, are there any other comments? Does anybody want to make a motion to remove either of the members at this point? All right, well,
Right.
then I'm going to ask that you do reach out to the Attorney General to get a specific answer
And we,
to that.
our next meeting's on the 12th.
Yes,
We just put this back on there for the
right,
12th.
right, that's,
Try.
Well, but to
no,
some
but we
extent-
will put it on the 12th, but we're going to give them 2 weeks to give us an
I
answer.
mean, and at that point, I think we've got to, as the board, we've got to make a decision how we intend to apply it and let the chips fall where they. You know what I mean?
Right.
So-
Mr. Chair, I just have a comment as well. So whatever my personal opinion, just out of an abundance of caution, I'm in a butter to a matter that's currently in front of the zoning board, so I'm abstaining from any. Oh, sorry. So I'm in a butter to a matter that's currently in front of the zoning board. I've been advised to abstain from any voting or discussion of this topic, which is why I've been silent.
All right. Let's move on to the warrant articles.
The whole thing.
Now, I'm not sure it was put on as the whole warrant. I don't think we need to go through all of them again
I'm gonna go as quickly as I can, but I do
Well-
think that there are a number that I need to point out and have discuss a little bit,
Well-
just to get some clarification on. I will go as fast as I can.
Well, I think, again, we went through a lot of this last week.
I know, but unfortunately I couldn't be here. And so for some of these Laura and I started going through it today to sort of edit down the ones that I know about. So some of these will be consolidated and I didn't want to remove anything from the warrant that you had previously seen without at least explaining to you why it was no longer on here.
Mhm.
So I'll just hit those highlights. Obviously, Article 1, you already talked about bills of a prior year, right? Article 2, we'll probably tweak the language on this, but this is to fund the retroactive raises for the 2%. We'll make it more vague so that it will count with council approval of what the language will be. 3, 4, and 5 are the traditional transfers that we do, stabilization, CapEx, and OPEB. 5, we're taking off, that's regional substance abuse program that we did already in May, that'll be coming off. Article 7 seems fine. Article 8, I'm gonna tweak the language on that, so we're not start eliminating where it says salary account, because as you know, or you may recall, in the new budget, we're gonna be doing
Right.
salary expenditures and capital, and so we wanna, just basically say fire chief salary there. And you know that is for the transfers for the portion that we will be getting for basically recognizing the revenue we'll get from the other communities plus any additional expenditures that we've approved. Article 9 and 10 are essentially the same article. So very quickly, I have a meeting with Uxbridge and Millville on Monday. You may recall that we received a regionalization and efficiency grant in order to share a town planner We have had that town planner now for over a year, so we have initially, let me start this. The initial IMA that we did with the two other communities was that we were going to hire one planner, right? We went out, we tried to find somebody, couldn't find somebody. Then I hatched that crazy idea about let's go to regional sufficiency, let's add a junior planner and get a senior planner. And so basically what has to happen now is we have an IMA that we potentially have to amend in order to recognize the grant. And I have to do transfers in order to pay for those things because the grant was for the first year. And so, and I have to meet with the other two communities to make sure everybody is on board with the new amounts going forward because the original agreement was for 1 year.
And to clarify, Articles 9 and 10 are duplicative, so you're removing one, and one article will do everything you just said.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I'll know better about amounts once I have my meeting next week. Article 11, you already had that. That's the request from the library. Article 12, I had put on here as a placeholder because we had talked about prioritizing the senior center this year as one of our priorities. I know that they already did an architectural study. I know that they were following up and they do have plans. It would be worth it, and I haven't spoken to them. I just had a list that we should, before we pull this or table it, I want to have a conversation with them about if there really is a need to actually continue or expand on the study that was done.
They were there
Because-
last week and we talked about it.
Did they say so? Oh, great. That would be excellent. So that's perfect. Same thing for the next one. This should say transfer balance from 350th to, and I'm saying community events, not celebrations, because I think celebration sounds weird as a thing. For the future. This ADA, so we talked about this a little bit earlier, I think, but so this placeholder for the elevator isn't actually going to be, this is a May ATM article, but we did have some discussion today about potentially paying for the architect to design that area on this STM. I wasn't planning on it because I think that we might have funding within what we have now, but I'm willing to change this language and put it on and see what that costs. I haven't heard back yet from the commercial construction architect that we had. I sent him a reminder email today. So I really don't even have an estimate of how much, if any, that we would pay for professional services for design. So we'll just hold it for now. We've got a couple more weeks.
But potentially pass it over if you find we don't need
Yeah,
funding.
I don't want to bring it to town meeting if my biggest concern at this point with all of this stuff regarding the remodel is that we might have funds available, available basically left over. And I want to utilize whatever we have before going back and asking for more money or saying we need free cash for this, and we actually don't. And so if this is a $10,000 study, I feel pretty confident that we might be able to figure that out in-house, but I don't know yet. So that's what this is. 15, is the thing from Jody about selling that parcel.
Let's talk about that.
Okay, go ahead.
I spoke with Jody today, but the way she explained it to me is there are two pieces of property within 44 Milford Street. One of them is town owned and the other one is privately owned. And the attempt is to resolve it so that the owner at 44 Milford Street could buy it from the town because it's landlocked.
Right.
But before any of that can happen, it has to be appraised.
It has to go
So
to town
when
meeting.
Jody talked to me today and didn't know if it required a vote of this committee to authorize her to do what she has to do statutorily, or if it was okay for me to just tell her. Well, I said, I don't know. It's fine with me, but I don't know. So I said I would ask council tonight. So she has to have the property, the piece of town-owned land appraised, the piece of privately owned land. She's going through that process privately with the owners. That's a separate issue.
But we need permission to sell it.
Right.
Well,
Right.
not the private piece.
The private piece, the town shouldn't
Well,
have
that's what I'm
anything to
saying.
do.
So all I'm talking about is the town-owned land.
Right.
But that we'd have to get permission at town meeting
To sell.
to sell it.
And
But
you-
the question she asked tonight is before we can even come up with a number, she has to have it appraised. And she doesn't know if she could do that without the select board's permission. And I said, as far as I'm concerned, I think you can, but I would ask at the meeting tonight.
I think you probably could too, but I mean, the other concern is which comes first? Do you want to spend the money for an appraisal before you get town meeting authorization?
Well, her answer to me was that she needs to figure out, what it's, what
But
it's.
there are things short of a formal appraisal that can give her a ballpark idea, because depending on what that value of the property is,
Mhm.
may impact the number and types of votes you have to have at town meeting. And I mean, it's not a foregone conclusion that the town can take a parcel of property and give it to the person next to it. That's just not automatically allowed.
Well, they have to vote to sell it to them, right?
No, they have to vote to sell the property, and then
Right.
depending on the value of the property, you have to go through certain procurement methods. So you couldn't say, we're gonna sell
Another
it
buyer
just to
could
this
come in and
person.
offer more.
I'm sorry?
You might have another buyer that's interested.
Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah,
issue
someone may
is,
buy it and have it be conservation land, never to be built.
right, but the issue is the property is landlocked. It's within this person's, yeah, I know.
I
but it's
get
a-
it, and
it's-
that may
it's-
be why it's not gonna come.
It's like 800 square feet or some other, it's a very small, but I get
So
it.
it may come up with a
Right.
very low value so that, you don't have huge procurement issues. And it could be that it's only going to be, attractive to
So
one person. I'm
so
just
the-
saying, you can't just jump from, we want to sell it and we want to sell it to this person without jumping through some other hoops.
So the short answer is that, does she need authorization from this select board to vote to allow her to figure out what the value of the property is, to have it appraised, or can she just do it?
So my opinion would be, and I don't know if it's like or not. Why doesn't the buyer have the appraisal done, or have us pick the appraiser and the buyer pay for the appraisal?
Well, the way I asked her that very same question. She said the issue would be that she would do it and that cost would be passed on to the buyer.
Why is this coming up? I guess that's my
Because
question.
because there are people that own 44 Milford Street that want to use the property, and there's this little piece in the middle of it.
And they want it.
Yes.
So, I mean, I would just, well, no, no, my.
They're right
I'm
there.
just- It's us. The property, I'm just trying to get.
We're all around it. It's one little spot. It's like,
With all due respect, and with the best interest of the town's fiscal policies at stake in hand, given that it's not gonna be much money.
We have no problem with getting it appraised. We have no problem with the value of it.
It's,
It's landlocked, it's unusable to anybody
Well,
else who has no.
Then you're
road
right.
access.
All right, well then
And
go,
that
why
was
don't
we
you go
just
ahead
have
and
to go
call
through
Jody
proper
tomorrow
training.
and do just what Lonnie suggested and offer to.
yeah, but they
no,
legally had to talk about it with you guys before
we
we could
have
proceed
to
in anything.
get permission to actually sell it first. There's no guarantee. We have to go to town
Right.
meeting to vote to be able to sell the piece.
Well, that's not what she said to me today.
Well, maybe she doesn't understand the process.
Okay. that's
I mean,
possible
we
too.
can't sell a parcel below appraised value. That's a fact. So
That's
we
true.
will have to do an appraisal.
Without special.
Right.
But to Cindy's point, we could probably do a guesstimate of the value, put it to town meeting, and when they ask, how much do we think it's worth, we can say, we think it's about, let's just say
So we don't have
$1,000.
to.
Right.
There's no statute, so there's no statute that says we have to have an approved appraisal to know what the exact amount is?
To
No.
sell it.
No, and there's
I thought that's what
nothing,
you just said.
you need to fair market value, which is not only an appraisal, you can do by a whole other bunch of different ways. But can I just finish one
Yeah,
thing,
sure.
Lonnie, then I'm sorry.
Please.
I would say, if the people who seem to want to have this property are willing to find out the value of it, it doesn't matter if it happens before or after you have the authority to sell the property. So if they're willing to proceed before a town meeting even comes to the table to address whether they want to keep it for whatever reasons they want or not, it could be helpful in a public discussion about what the town wants to do to know what kind of value we're talking about. So I don't think there's anything that would prohibit a private party from getting value of that property, as long as you give them authority to access the property or get on it if they need, but they may not even need to, because they can probably do it from their own property. And you just can't sell it directly to them, and you cannot sell it without town meeting authority.
Right, and hence why it's on the warrant, but Jane?
I think I have an objection to them paying for the appraisal, because if it goes to town meeting and the town says, no, we're not gonna sell it. What are you gonna do? I guess you can fund their money, but that,
I agree kind of with what you're saying, Jane, that I don't know that I mind them paying for the appraisal, because they want to pay for the appraisal. Maybe we wait till after town meeting, so nobody wastes any money. However, the appraisal company needs to be picked by the town. They're just going to pay the bill because we need to still have that clarity there.
The appraisal will be passed. on to us.
But before we go to a town meeting vote. Don't we have to know how much it's
Sorry,
worth?
one other thing.
But you
too. One
could
other
even
thing.
have them do something and it could be non-binding. You could have the assessor look at records. You could look at, I mean, there's a whole host of things that you can do to
You
get.
can have a
some
real estate agent
information.
do a CMA on it, even like probably Kelly, the ones that are doing all of our
Do
work.
we actually need to know how much it's worth, or are we just asking for permission to sell that property?
Right, and.
According to the treasurer.
Yeah.
That answer is yes, we need to know officially. That's what, because that was the question I asked her. Do we even need to go there? And she said, yes, she needs to know
Well,
officially.
we definitely need
Before
to
you
have a
sell it.
value before you sell it.
Right.
But we don't need to,
They're just giving us the authority to do
But
something.
we need to have, I also think it's incumbent upon the town to know the value, at least approximately, before we go and ask
100%,
people.
but we don't have to
But-
do a formal appraisal. Bring it,
Right.
I mean, let's assume we can guesstimate by different sources without spending the money up front.
Mhm.
I mean, and then, because take them out of it. What if we're not selling it to them? I don't want them
Well-
paying for anything in advance.
But I still think it's a good idea to find out how much the property is worth and officially know what it is.
Yeah, we have to.
That's, all right, well,
That's
that's,
a must.
and that's what I said to it today, but I brought it in front of the board, so.
Big is the
I
piece.
believe it's valued at $800. It's an eighth of an acre.
It's little, it's just,
Okay.
it's annoyance, is really what
Right.
it is.
Why don't you just take it by maintaining it for 7 years? Isn't that a way?
You can't have eminent domain against the municipality.
Oh, bummer, sorry.
And
Yeah, that's our house and the property goes way in the behind and it curves around all the way up to where like Native Automotive is. It's like a total of 38 acres. And it's like a little pinpoint in the middle of all that land
Let's have a parcel
that you
number.
can't get to. We thought we owned it. When we bought 44, we thought we owned it. And then when we had it surveyed, they said, well, what's this little piece? And we're like, I don't know, we own it. And they're like, I don't think you do. And the town didn't know about it. And so the town had to go and they said, oh, we own this land. We took it from back taxes or however your wordage is. And so now if you're sitting there and not getting taxed, then you're paying taxes on it.
So we should
Like, well,
change
what are
the
we gonna
number,
do to
right? The
get rid of
parcel
it?
number,
We gotta get off our books.
Yeah, I'd put a
parcel number
on it.
instead of address.
Yeah.
For that,
Yeah, it doesn't even have a parcel number.
because we'll be
Yeah,
selling
it's
your
zero.
house.
It's zero.
Your house will be sold at town meeting.
$800.
No, even the town can't by town meeting sell something they don't own. You know, this may be one of those things that's gonna be, you
Yeah.
know.
It already has been.
And I'm sure you've been just putting a little fence around and saying, not ours, we can't use,
Yeah, it's
right?
like a garden. Don't step in the evil garden.
I got a 138-page title report.
all right, let's move. We beat that. Let's
Okay.
go on to 16.
All right, so I also put 16 on here as a placeholder because we had talks earlier in the year about looking at some sort of building or at least a cost of a building for parks. Were they here last? week?
Yes,
Okay, so they spoke to this?
Yes.
And that's happening?
yes.
Okay, good, excellent, when it comes together. Okay, so for the next couple, I'm not gonna get into what they're for. But all of these articles already have dedicated a funding source, which is not at the purview, that shouldn't be printed. That has to go to the FinCom, so we can't say free cash. And my question here is, was the intention when he spoke to add this amounts of money to his operating budget? Or are these special articles for one-time use? Does anybody?
Isn't one snow and ice?
No, one isn't snow and ice. These are account lines that are in here, look like operating budget lines, but typically we don't transfer from free cash into
Well,
operating. lines.
he,
Yeah.
in red, he explains the reason. He called me and said he was not going to be here tonight because they're holding a wedding at their house this weekend, so
But-
he's.
So
for that, so.
I'm just saying, we typically don't increase an operating budget for
Right.
one-time expenditures like this. What we would do is, same thing, you can use, I mean, technically use the same source, but you do separate articles for each one, and then that's a little tiny line that gets created for each thing that's only specific for that amount
Mhm.
in the budget process, not part of the operating budget. So I just,
So you want to reword it, so it's instead of a,
and I'm gonna take out free cash, because we still it
Right.
has to go, if it's a supported,
Right,
basic, it can go to the operating budget. That's not a no,
yeah.
but
So what you're saying is you just want to transfer a sum of money to replace the power washer.
Yeah, and like, say we did that and we didn't specify what line it was going to, it would just be like, here's 10 grand for a power washer
Right.
that sits
Right.
there in
From a
perpetuity.
tracking standpoint, adding additional lines for these specific things actually makes sense from a tracking.
So that you
standpoint.
know, and because the next year, when you look at the operating budget, it
Right.
looks like it's increased by all of this.
So you're suggesting reword these or eliminate free cash, eliminate the specific account line item and add a dummy for that specific 8,100.
Yeah, I mean, we have been steadily, as you know, increasing the amounts that we put in for road maintenance and materials every single budget cycle. And it's very possible that he's saying here, I wasn't there, that he's already has a deficit in some, and so he needs a transfer. I just need clarification on what this is. So, and then we'll sort out
But
the
the clarity-
mechanism that we traditionally use, and then that can go to FinCom so that it doesn't look as if we're, I don't know.
But the clarity of line items makes sense. Then you're understanding your baseline versus what you're adding in very clearly on a output, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so like for this thing about the furnace, right, we talked about this, right?
Yeah.
And so he needs $10,000. Does this mean he needs $10,000 for furnace replacement and it's about to be done? Or does it mean that he's already spent the money from his maintenance account and we are replenishing the account? Because those are different things.
No, that's definitely not, it's,
All right, so
it's the former.
Just so FYI, I got to work on those two. And that's about I thought we already funded this 22 in the budget. I'm pretty sure we already went up to
22 for what?
the stormwater management
Stormwater
program.
management.
He already asked for 20 grand and more, and I think we put it in his operating budget.
We just had a meeting about
Double
that.
check because he mentioned that we took it out
Right.
of the budget during
All
maybe
right,
final cut
Yeah,
or
the-
something,
because
just confirm.
We just had a meeting this
Hold
last
up.
week, right? Yeah,
I,
we had a meeting about it and that's what he said was it would, he had asked for it, but it wasn't in the budget. That's what he said.
okay.
I'm not saying,
No, I
Right.
can't think of a reason why we would have cut it, but okay, I'll check. And then I didn't go through the CPA one. Sorry, Ann, I didn't get that.
well, we went through those
I
last
just
week.
assumed you already covered those.
Yep.
So just so that you're aware, I mean, I will make all of those edits, and then when we come back on the 12th, we'll have something different in front of you. But at least you'll know where some of them went.
But what you're doing is you're modifying what's here. We're not adding anything new. Agreed?
No, and so that's the
Yeah.
next part of the conversation, right? Which is, I know we got a request today.
Was this the easement?
So, yeah, so there's an easement, and then I had mentioned a couple that I know probably should be May, but,
So do we have to open the warrant and then,
so what would we do? Open it and close it today?
well, we would
Open it,
close it next week with the changes, right?
no, I wouldn't close it
Yeah.
today.
You want us to take a motion to reopen the warrant?
Right.
And we're gonna reopen it until the 11th, basically, till we meet again?
Why not?
To the next meeting, the 12th, yeah.
Well, can it be the 11th so we could at least have a day to do the thing, right?
Whatever that Monday is before the 12th, the 10th, right?
Yeah, that's the holiday. Oh, it's a holiday, so,
Bad choice by me.
yeah, so if we're gonna, so that's.
Suppose the
fine.
Thursday before.
Then that's something you have to do.
Yeah, then the
And then we
Thursday
can
before.
Send out an email again that says, one time only, opening the
Right,
warrant.
so I'd be looking for a motion,
You know what I mean?
Yes, well,
motion to reopen the warrant to, looks like Thursday, October 6th.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All
next,
those in favor?
next Thursday.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so since we're on this and we're gonna add articles, I just want to throw my pitch in here for the two that are on for me that have had floated for a while. One is that we have a cap, a general bylaw, Cindy, this is for you, that says that we are not allowed to put more than $150,000 annually into CapEx. I'd like to eliminate that because we've hit our targeted stabilization. And so now we really should be contributing more towards our equipment replacement. So that's one that I'm always talking about. The other one is Friday nights in May.
Yeah.
It comes up a lot. So just throwing those out there as ones that,
Say it again, Friday nights.
moving the ATM from
Instead
Friday
of it-
nights in May.
Instead of the,
I know,
instead of it
it's
being,
rough. A
right,
lot of
right.
people complain, it's like, cause the prom was last year on a Friday.
Yeah,
So-
because it was the kids'
Yeah.
dance, right?
Right, so I'm just, think about it for a week and we can revisit it when we come back, but those are the two that I always are like that's out there, that we talk about a lot, that we never.
And you have a question?
Oh, and the easement, we got that one, yeah.
You did that?
Yes. No,
No,
we
she's
didn't
going-
add
she's
it.
going to.
We
That's
will
why I
now
opened it,
that
so
we
we
have
can.
this, right.
And
So you opened the door for me because I wanted to
So-
these other two.
I was also just a follow-up from the CPC meeting I attended was last leftover funds that were used for the floors.
Mhm.
If it's CPC money, we should probably move that back to the appropriate CPC account, just as a matter of cleanup. Does that make
Well,
sense?
do you want to move it back before we do the next phase?
That's up to them to vote that.
Yeah, I mean, if you are going to do more floors, keep it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I mean, for the bigger piece we do in May, I mean, they're not original floors under there, but I mean, restoration of the wood to match, and I mean, it's $3,000, so.
My only other comment too is I'm all for removing the cap on the CapEx number. But I also want to make the point on stabilization being at its target. That target is a base. It's not a ceiling. In all seriousness, because I've heard that
Yeah.
referred to at town meetings. I want to make sure that we're still
Yeah,
contributing, so.
So while we're talking about CapEx, and I don't want to drag it on any longer, but the CapEx, we can never seem to fill that committee. Do we need a CapEx? Should we just be eliminating this altogether? Is there some weird law? Is there something that's better for master plans?
So this is you, Cindy, sorry. So this
Sorry.
general, we have a general bylaw that says we will have a CapEx committee. My question is, can it just be the select board?
I'd have to look at the bylaw language.
Okay,
But
because
if the
to
bylaw
me,
says you
we're
have
the
to have a
ones that are
CapEx.
vetting it anyway. I mean,
Right.
I don't think it
You
I
can
think it-
change the bylaw any way you want to change it.
Okay.
You can put in that you have this committee and you can specify that how it be X number of people and that there be X representatives from the select board as long as it's
can-
not a quorum or
Right.
from the.
We can never get enough people. on the
FinCom.
committee 'cause
So-
there's no money in it.
But there's a need now, and Lonnie, I want to keep the CapEx account.
Mhm.
I think it's more about how do we get a body to.
Right, just can somebody else oversee it?
Right.
Mhm.
I think that's where we need to take it, because I mean,
Okay.
Brendan and I were at this budget subcommittee for the school. They've got capital all over the place. Upton has it. We need to be able to come forward with a similar need, so that when it comes down to the school asking for funding, we understand and we voice this, we saying, well, we might need to fund the town, say, I don't know, water and sewer and things like that, to increase commercial base, to increase school funding versus you fixing a roof type of
Got
thing.
it.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So
I guess then my question
Yeah.
becomes, is this ready for prime time in the fall? If you want to make some substantive changes to the committee, or do you want it at town meeting in the spring when it's before
maybe
more
general
people?
bylaws need hearings? No? General-
Zoning does,
They're all general bylaws, right?
I believe so, but it's a question of, the audience you're gonna get, the time you're gonna
I
have.
do think May is the better for
I-
any
I
change like
would
that.
too. I
It
would
seems
agree.
like the more appropriate time.
It doesn't mean you can't do what you want to do with the limit on this one.
Right.
For this, but, I mean, you might want to just,
Yeah.
I know what you want to do, but it sounds like it's.
No, I'd much rather have a
broader.
committee in place before and have them recommend increasing or removing the cap with the actual, I mean, Mike's point is valid. I totally agree with him. 5% of stabilization is criminal. I mean, it should be 12. That's my opinion. But we can never grow CapEx, which is why we never have a committee, because it never grows. We only have $250,000 in there, or 280, and we spend 120 every year, which I said this today. That's like the price of an expensive SUV. It's like we are never gonna hit and grow in that account at
Suggestion?
150 grand a year, so.
I would think any change to bylaw needs to be spring. I think we
Yeah,
can
I'm-
remove the
I'm fine.
cap. I think we remove the cap STM, and maybe we make a push to, maybe we make another push at forming a capital committee as is, and if that
As is,
doesn't
yeah.
work, we use that as a feed into the spring.
Yeah, I mean, I
Couldn't
feel.
do it, let's change it.
I feel very comfortable defending the removal of it, and particularly then when they say, well, you don't have a committee and you don't have a plan and you don't have this, we've heard this for years. And the reason is, we've had a lot of great people volunteer for the committee, but when there's only $200,000 to spend, doesn't feel like your time is being rewarded, your investment in time. And so I think, the finance that's a great thing to go to the finance committee too. They need some projects like that to feel like they are involved. So, I mean, it's up to you guys. I'm saying them because I'll just say them every time we have a warrant for forever. So, they are things we should look at, right? Okay, anything else?
No, I think I've said enough for one night.
Okay. What else?
All right, meeting minutes. July 13th, August 29th, and September 21st.
Oh, they didn't do anything about town meeting date. They said May.
So
that-
I moved to accept the meeting minutes for
That's my question.
July 13, August 29, September 21, 2020.
I have a second?
Second.
Discussion point.
Sure.
My only point would be, I know it's another boards and committee coverage, the minutes as reflected are accurate. So I'm going to approve it, but I do think we should put it out there because I know, I think Carl's still on, so he was told that I was the Concom contact and Lonnie and I have worked, kind of covered it. But that actually wasn't discussed. So as we continue to, let's clarify to folks, in complete coverage if we can, maybe in the next meeting or two. And Carl, we'll still be there for you. Don't worry about it. We're just saying.
I got an admin. I'm happy.
There you go. All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Do we have a board, anybody want to update us on the boards or commissions?
Sure. So I went to BOH and Concom, filling in for Mike that wasn't assigned. So, the Concom was more just, again, they were happy about the appointment. And they did some interviews. They interviewed on Sweet and also John D'Amelio. The third person was invited, but they hadn't gotten back to them.
That would be Robin Fletcher. And he did send an email to this board, or at least to me, and I think I forwarded it to the whole board about his desire to fill in for that spot until, the one that expires in 2023.
Yep. On the Board of Health, there's new dumpster regulations that they put in that more for the vendor of the dumpsters, giving options for AQUA permits that are just one time instead of having to have that annual. There was also flu clinic discussion. I don't have the date, but I know it's on the electronic sign up the street. There was a few more housekeeping items that they were working on. But those are the two biggest things I would say was those regulations and that. Other than that, everything was pretty status quo.
Brendan and I both attended the school budget subcommittee kickoff, and that's pretty much what it was. It was a kickoff. They provided a timeline for what their process looks like. Upton weighed in, indicated that they had something similar, so they're looking to sort of consolidate across all three entities to kind of put it together. There's a link, or we'll get a link for all this documentation that's on the school website, so we can pass that around. In general, it was education, open discussion. The biggest thing that I took away, Brendan, I don't know if you agree, but it's that with the election in November with the governor, that they expect a 2-month delay in getting numbers from the state with the new budget. So it's more of a March timeframe than it is sort of late January. So they're sort of cautious, I guess, about that, but it's pretty much discussion. Meetings are being scheduled, and yeah, they asked that we would have representation there, which we will, and we just need to circle back with Mike and FinCom to make sure that FinCom has representation too.
The one other thing that.
Well, I had said I would handle the representation for the FinCom when it's sent to me.
The one other thing that they discussed that I took away was that there's an ongoing study of building facilities and projected life plans that's going to reduce the time in this room.
Yeah, that
CapEx planning.
Yeah, that ties into the CapEx, and we talked a little bit about possibly kicking off a multi-board with an eye more towards that type of discussion across the town. So we have synergies on capital planning, things like that. Thought being it would be more in line with the delivery of that study. We thought maybe quarterly, maybe one in November to kick it off and then follow up when these studies come in. So from our standpoint, I think we should start to pull together some framework around what are we looking to do and what we might need so that we have some asks when we have the discussion with school about theirs.
So let me just jump in on that piece, because I responded to that email about the follow-up from that meeting. So I did start this week. I've met with both the town accountant and the finance director to talk about our budget process. I think you all know that typically our budget process is, I send out a memo first week of December to all the departments. They have to input their data for a level funded budget by the end of the calendar year. If they have any changes beyond a level service budget, that they have to fill out 2 forms. One is a capital form and one is an operational form. And then we'll start, in the past, before last year, where we changed the process a little and have everybody together. In the past, during that month of December or even beginning of January, I would meet with all of the departments who had changes, and we would have a meeting together and we'd have notes and sort of go through what the requests were. And then I would bring basically that list of requests, which is usually between $300,000 to $600,000 worth of operational requests, and then capital is separate, to the board, explain what they are. And then from our standpoint, we start to meet with the FinCom over the next couple of months, but all of it is really hypothetical until the school gives us their numbers at the very end of March. And so we'll continue to do that this year. The only difference will be we're going to follow up what we did last year, which is that anybody who has a request for any department, and possibly any department, I will have come to a select board meeting or a joint finance committee meeting, so that we're just doing one and done again for each department. Many of the requests, for those who have been around for a while, are the same every single year. We know what's coming. I'm not anticipating any outrageous changes in requests. Like, we should know will come operationally. The biggest driver, of course, will be what's different on revenue, especially in terms of new growth. A revenue meeting is going to be held in December, which is typically what we do. So we'd have a better idea then. We are kicking over to a new financial system, this. And so we are actually going to be trained on it next week, which is myself, the town accountant, and the finance director. It's the same system as before. It's KVS, but now it's cloud-based. So it should be pretty straightforward. This system itself will allow the departments to just input their budgets as they've always done, just in a new format.
Is this still the same software that we decided to purchase?
Yes, Springbrook. It's the same. This is just the budget module.
Mhm.
And so now that the initial accounting piece is in, now we're moving to the budget module piece. Primarily, as I said in that email, this is only the second year for the finance director, and ideally we are going to be transitioning everything that's finance into that department. But for the sake of history of the budget, I'm still going to be right there, right? So that she has all the support that she needs, and so will the town accountant, and she will be the primary point of contact, especially for the FinCom, strictly answering anything, and you'll all be here. So you can answer policy or basically politic questions for the FinCom or anybody else, and she can speak just to the numbers, right? And I can speak to the history. And that's basically our format going into this budget year. We're set up from last year still to have a shared folder that anyone could access at any time related to budget documents. So when we get there, we will. I will be sending out that memo probably 1 month early this year, just because in November, just in case we need a little more time on the back end with the, producing whatever it's going to look like or printing it out, just to get people, through the phase. So look for that in November. I think that's it on the budget.
So one of the things, there's probably an open question, I think, in terms of the way the school compiles, they're always going to come in with, they're trying to understand what revenue they can expect, right?
Right.
So, Jay said this before, it used to be a 50-50, and I
Right.
said, used to be is right, so.
Right.
But I do think we should think about what kind of guidance we can give them. Now, right now, if I'm in a meeting with, I would probably say, focus on your expenses. What are
Right.
your needs? What are your expenses? Because everybody's revenue is not going to be really solidified until March when the state comes in, right? But I do think it would, just to be able to, this board should come to some, or FinCom, I'm not sure who should come to give them some direction on what guidelines they should work under, because that will be a reoccurring
Right.
question in these meetings.
Perfect. So even in last year's budget or in the year before, typically when I'm having that conversation with Jay in December, we haven't actually stopped giving them the 50-50 number. What we said was, if it's anything over the 50-50 number, which in our case is over $315,000 last year, then it's an override. And if you're going for an override, then go for it all, because we don't have it anyway to give. We can't support the request, which was $890,000 off the jump. And that's where we started. So again, for this year, I would stick with the same, which is half a new growth to 2.5, the same numbers we always do.
50/50.
Yeah.
So the past practice holds. He's good to work with that. And then anything that deviates from that is a discussion.
Yeah, and I mean,
Okay.
and the real, but getting people to understand that that 50/50 number is $300,000 is the key. Because maybe it even fluctuates to 400,000. That's not enough for them and it's too much for us, right? That's a huge amount for our budget. And so that's really where it gets tricky.
For
So,
planning purposes, 50/50, and then the action associated with balancing the budget is an open discussion, whether it's override 100%, you know what I mean? That's
Yep.
fair, but all we need to do is give them guidance. If that's the guidance we're all agreeable to, 50/50, I think that'll.
and that's
Happy to go with
typically
that.
what we've done. And I would say that with the only caveats, of course, and they'll give the same ones, which are, we have no idea what our driver numbers are really. And for me, the killer in the last year, just as an example, is the last 2 years, actually, our Worcester County retirement number has increased by over $100,000 over the last 2 years, every year. So when you think about that, so health insurance, it's the same for them, retirement, right? Those are numbers. And I do think it would be really beneficial in these budget subcommittee meetings. We've never done, or even in a multi-board meeting, where we actually go in and show them what the town's revenue numbers look like, because I think because I don't think there is a general understanding of how little money we're actually splitting together. And I think that's part of the
I
problem.
would be happy to take that to the table.
Yeah,
I'm not
because
sure why they wouldn't see that, though. They should see that on there.
I know, but unless you're
Cherry
looking
sheets
at
and
our
stuff.
budget and you see this is 315, and then we only have 2 million in local receipts, they think we're bringing in a lot more money
Yeah.
than we are. And
Right.
so I think if we could just explain to them,
Can I work with you or Jody to put something together? Because we can bring that to the next subcommittee meeting.
I think that I would probably best, I mean,
Okay.
Jody should probably come if she's available. And would probably be good also to bring Eric. And I think probably the best time frame for that actual meeting is probably when we have a better picture of revenues in December.
Well,
But-
not even the money, but even take.
Last
just
year's?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just the mechanisms, similar to what they did for us, right?
Right.
Chapter 70 and all that good stuff.
Oh, just so we're clear, we have done that and explained that
We do,
to
right?
the same people.
I just
And
feel like
it's-
I've
and
got to put
just-
it on.
just so we're clear, and
I
that-
would not believe what I heard in the subcommittee meeting
Yeah.
when they reviewed chapter 70 back to me. It's like, you've heard this before. I said, yeah, but tell me again. Come on. So,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
repetition is key here.
It's difficult. It's been, I mean, we've had a good couple of years where we were working very closely with Upton. I think part of the confusion and where the aggravation comes in is that we don't understand each other. And because we're dealing with different amounts of dollars, like their budget is so much larger than ours. And the amount of revenue, I mean, in some years, and it's hard for me to explain, but I use this one scenario again, because I can't help it, like, they make suggestions to us and we consider every suggestion about efficiency around here. This is not a place that
Yeah, I'm not.
has a lot of excess, but when we talk about making concessions or looking at co-pays for employees or negotiating, they're literally talking about negotiating down co-pays so that employees can give up money that then goes to their budget. Like, that's how little our budget is here.
This
So,
is education. This is not solutioning, and I'm happy to be a
Well,
messenger on it.
yeah, I think it's big, because when
Yeah.
you start talking just about, well, our percentages went up the same and our percentage, and you keep adding employees, it's not the same. Like, it's not. And like, if we have the money and the town wants, and that's my other position, which is, you want to support an override and you can get the support and you can pass that, do it. Happy for you, but not at the cost of town services. That's it. So we haven't done an operational override. We talk about it a lot. I prefer not to do it because I don't think anybody has an appetite for it, but
Yeah, overrides is not really a good environment for overrides, I would say.
yeah, so
Brandon.
I would rather us all just stay within our budgets for the next year or so.
But I got my marching orders, 50/50, and I'm going to be able to talk about how our revenues work, so everybody can be very baseline on the same page.
Perfect,
All right.
good.
Since
Sorry.
you're inviting everybody, just let me know when I'll show up.
So 10, discuss upcoming meeting dates. We've got them on the calendar in October for October 12th and October 26th.
So I wrote down a couple of other dates, and just because of the meeting, it gets a little tricky. End of the year, so we can always add, is what I'll say, but we like to have some dates set so we can plan out some things. I have the 12th, the 26th, the 9th, okay? Which would be the next every other Wednesday. But then we have STM, which is 11/14. So we probably won't meet, we would meet before STM and not meet the following week, which is right before Thanksgiving, which is usually good unless we need to, right? That's so, and then in December, we typically only meet once. I'm gonna say we meet twice and
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
The following week is the 23rd after the STM. Would you want to defer a week to the 30th of November? Would that be the first meeting in November, December?
I would have the first meeting be the 7th
Seventh?
of
Okay.
December. And here's why. And then we normally only meet once. You can all frown at me but I think we should also meet on the 21st if possible, only.
It'll be a happy.
We haven't done it in many years, but if we are seriously committing to bringing in all the departments again, and I have something ready for the end of the year, and we can make it fun, I'm just saying, you know,
Put it on there anyway, if we can always.
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm putting, I know, yeah, I normally don't, but I
It'll still
mean,
be
it would,
there.
it could be, I don't know, just hypothetically, it's out
I'm
there.
fine with that.
I know we'll probably cancel it, I get it, but I'm
It's
just,
in the books.
it's because what happens is we're gonna get to January and we're gonna have to have really long meetings,
Right.
and so.
So if we're all in agreement with those dates, that takes us to the end of the year.
Yeah.
Does that mean we're going to remove every other Wednesday that we're booked for, just to clean up the calendar?
Yeah, I got a question about that the other day.
Yeah,
So once we book these dates, then free them up, because the FinCom also meets Wednesdays or did, and so we have to sort of start figuring
I
that
think
out.
Ellen just put us in,
That's-
and she just made it consecutive, so it's
I know,
every
I
Wednesday.
got a call yesterday that said, is the select board really meeting every
Right,
week? And
yeah.
I said, God,
I
hope
just need to
not."
get with her and have her just.
okay.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
All right. Do we have anything else?
That's enough.
Actually, I would actually say it's too much.
So-
This meeting is.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
We
All
have
those
it.
in favor? Aye. Thank you.
Yeah, no kidding.
Good. Great.
About a consent. You can talk,
Yeah, it
you
was a
can
good
talk to Mike about a consent agenda. That's his purview.
Sorry.
He's the chair.